All right, so good evening, everybody, and welcome. I wrote a little post the other day that some of you may or may not have seen. I don't know if you did. If you didn't, it's okay. Sharing one of my beliefs about how I choose to look at life. Because what I've found is that how you see the world and then how you see yourself within the world is more often than not the experience that you consistently have in the world. So I'm going to say that again. How you see the world and then how you see yourself within the world tends to be how you experience the world. The results that you experience in your life, more often than not, are a direct reflection of the beliefs that you tell yourself, the stories that you tell yourself, the stories you tell yourself about your past, the stories that you tell yourself about today, the stories that you tell yourself about where you're going. And so one of the beliefs that I carry is that I carry the belief that I don't know when it comes to an intention that I set or a goal that I have in mind or a long-term desired outcome, I don't know how or when it's going to happen. I don't know how or when it's going to happen. But what I do know is that it is happening and it has already happened. Okay, we're going to go over that one more time. I don't know how and when it's going to happen. I just know that it's happening and it has already happened. Now, how many of you, just drop a 1 in the chat box, how many of you struggle to adopt that mindset, that it's hard for you to adopt the mindset of just trusting that everything's working on your behalf, that trusting that even though I don't know what it looks like or how the pieces are going to fall together, it's hard for me to trust that it's going to come together in a way that I like. Okay, so thank you for those of you that are being on. So one of the things that you want to start to look at, or that I invite you to start to look at, is to what degree is your desire to want to control the outcome affecting a more positive outcome in your life, in any area, okay? In any area. And you guys know me, like when I come on here, my friend, he asked me, he said, well, what are you going to teach on? And I said, well, more often than not, Eden might teach some skills or other leaders come teach some skills, but more often than not, when I come on here, I just want to have a conversation with you guys about life. Because when you can get clear in your life principles and you can apply that to your business becomes more fun, it becomes more enjoyable, it becomes smoother, and even when it's hard, it feels easier because I'm solid in my life principles and I use my life principles to guide my business choices. So if I have the belief that everything is working in my favor at all times and everything is happening and it's already happened, and I apply that to business, now I don't experience as much stress. I don't experience as much frustration. I don't experience as much of like, well, why aren't things going the way that I thought they should supposed to be going? Because I learned a long time ago that when I surrendered needing to control every aspect of my life was when I gained complete control of my life. And that's a difficult thing for most people to accept, is that when I surrendered to the reality that I was not in control of my life was when I got complete control of my life. And another way of looking at this, and again, just honoring whatever your spiritual beliefs are, whatever your beliefs are, that's fine. For the context of this, I'm going to use the word God. You can use the word spirit, source, unicorns, mermaids. I don't care. Whatever it is for you, whatever feels good for you. Okay, it doesn't matter to me. But there's a quote that I love that says, when we make plans, God laughs. When we make plans, God laughs. There's a reason that I have surrender tattooed on my arm right here. Because when I surrendered control of my life was when I got control of my life. And so the degree to which I'm willing to tolerate uncertainty and not knowing how things are going to turn out is the degree to which life becomes more enjoyable for me. How much uncertainty can you tolerate, and what is your attitude when you don't know how things are going to turn out? So for example, a lot of you, I said, how many of you would like to hit the Crystal, manager bonus by next Sunday? Everybody says, I'd love to do it, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And then what starts to happen? Oh, but I don't know how am I going to do it? And that person just said no, and that person just returned their box, and that person is out of town, and I'm going on trip, and I have my kid has school this week, and I have this, that, and the other. Drop a 2 in the chat box if all of a sudden you had stories going to work on the mechanics of how it was going to happen. Okay. Why? Because the brain, the mind, is going to imagine whatever you put in it to imagine. That's what the imagination is for. That's why Einstein says that imagination is more powerful than knowledge. So even though I'm sitting here sharing with you, here's a belief system you can adopt, your ego says, I don't like that. No way. Let go of control, not know how it's going to happen, not know the fine details, not have everything in order, not knowing that. No way. Not me. I can't do that. I can't do that. And what's really fascinating is the more that you squeeze something, the more you stop the flow of that thing. Put it in the context of a relationship. How many of you, and not that you've ever been this person, of course not, never. How many of you have ever been with a person or maybe even a family member who's really needy? Just drop a 3 in the chat box, like constantly, like needs validation, needs you to message them every 5 seconds. Call me when you get home. Call me when you get to the restaurant. Who are you with? What are you doing? What are you wearing? Blah, 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 right? Just needy, 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 needy. And the more that they try and need you, the more what? They push you away. Well, it's the same thing for the things that you're holding on to. The things that you're holding on to don't want to be held. And if you are willing to let go of them, they will find their way to you in the way that you desire for them to find their way to you. The reality is that what I've learned about life is that most of what we think about life to be true is the opposite of what is true. We think that the more I control something, the more likely it is to happen. The opposite will happen. But the more I surrender and trust myself within that process of surrender, the more likely it's going to happen. And here's what's really fascinating. More often than not, it turns out 1,000 times better than you'd ever imagined when you were trying to control it. But the pain happens when we deny the reality of what we're experiencing and we try and control the outcome, as opposed to just staying within the practice of who we can be while the process is occurring. And so another segue into that, or another idea is, I just posted this literally 10 minutes before we got on this call, was that life will get better faster the sooner we are faster to be honest about how we can be better. So what are the areas in your life and in your business where, if you're being honest with yourself, you can be better? The business stuff, you can answer that for yourself. I could prospect more. I can be better at following up. I could be more consistent posting on social. I could probably restudy some of the trainings, and I could start teaching some of the trainings, right? These are areas where I can get better. But what about the important parts of your life? Where can you get better? Can you get better when it comes to going to bed at a reasonable hour so you get a full night's sleep? Drop a 4 in the chat box if you could be better about just that one thing. Just going to bed at a reasonable hour. Believe it or not, sleep is lack of sleep is one of the most detrimental things you can do to your mental health. So if you struggle with anxiety, if you get sad very easily, if you get frustrated very easily, if you find that you're in an agitated, angry state easily, look at your sleep patterns. Fellas, believe it or not, poor sleep for men that are getting only 5 to 6 hours of sleep, your testosterone levels are likely to be of someone 10 years older than you. So you could lose 10 years just from poor sleep in terms of testosterone levels. Okay. So where else can I get better? So that's a tangible, tactical thing, right? I could get better at sleep. I could get better at drinking more water. I could get better at making more loving choices, meaning instead of turning on the TV and scrolling all night, I could listen to a book or meditate a little bit or do some breath work. So again, these are tactical, tangible things. But What about like the really juicy stuff? Where else can you get better so that you can get honest with yourself so that life can get better faster? Well, where can you get better when it comes to being compassionate? How can you get better when it comes to forgiveness? How can you get better when it comes to being more loving, not just with the people that you're around, but most importantly with yourself? How can you get better about telling yourself more positive stories, like the story I created for myself that I don't know how or when it's happening, but I know that it's happening and it's already happened? How can I get better in that area? What are some of the negative self-talk stories that you get to reprogram? What are some of the underlying beliefs where you can look at it and be really honest with yourself and say, God, really, when I take a look at how I speak to myself, I don't really feel great about it. This is an area where I get to get better. What else? Where else can we be honest with ourselves? I could probably get better at being on time to places, because when I give somebody my word that I'm going to be somewhere at a certain place at a certain time, and I'm not there on time, that's me breaking my word, and not just to that person, but to me. Where else can I get better? Well, I can get better at doing the things that I say I'm going to do. Well, why is that important? Well, because if I do the things that I say I'm going to do, I'm going to build trust. Well, who am I going to build the most trust with? Sure, the people that I say I'm going to do it with, but most importantly, I'm going to build trust with myself. And in my experience, and I don't know how many thousands and thousands and thousands of people I've been humbled enough to work with at this point in my career, but more often than not, when people are frustrated and struggling in life and business, it's because they haven't learned how to trust themselves. So are you willing to get better at putting yourself in an environment where you can learn how to trust yourself? Well, what does that even look like? Well, small, tangible, micro intentions and goals. So for example, my goal is to go Crystal Manager by the reset on Sunday. Great, let's break it down. So that's my intention, that's my goal. Where do I have to get better? Time management. I've got to really prioritize this. So as soon as this call is done, I'm going to open my calendar and I'm going to open it up and I'm going to put in non-negotiable 1 or 2 hour pockets every day until Sunday to put myself in the best position. But is it enough just to prioritize my time? Of course not. What do I have to get better at? Well, I have to get better at maybe knowing my numbers. So if I look at it and say, okay, well, the company numbers are, 2 out of every 10 will become a consultant. And I look and see that I've only enrolled a total of 5 people in, say, the last 3 weeks or 7 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever it is. Okay. So number one is I've got to enroll some more people this week. So at least give myself a chance at being at 10 so that 2 can become consultant. That's an area where I've got to get better. But if you give yourself little opportunities to get better and you take action on those things, well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to learn to trust yourself. And then your ego that thing that you think is your enemy, it's not your enemy. It becomes your friend. Because what the ego sees is, oh, it's safe for me to pursue this. It feels good when I do this. I can survive while still taking these action steps. But the big problem that we make is, or the big challenge that we make is we look at it and we see, oh, well, Ilse and Tim, they went executive in 2 weeks. So I'm going to go executive in the next 2 weeks. But have you enrolled as many people as Ilse and Tim? No. Are you working as many hours as they are right now? Probably not. So does it make any sense whatsoever to your brain to try and now all of a sudden do something that you haven't done yet? It makes no sense. Why would you put yourself in a position like that to fail? Versus just looking at what can I control? Where do I get to improve? And then am I willing just to be consistent for that little bit of time so I can find out what I'm capable of? So I can demonstrate it to myself. Because then what starts to happen is, oh, wait a minute. If I was able to go manager in 7 days, and that meant developing 2 consultants, and the next goal is to go director, and that means 4 more. Now I can evaluate the structure that I set up for myself. So now I can do it again in the next 30 days or whatever it may be. But until you learn to get better at being compassionate with yourself, at being loving with yourself, at being on time for yourself, at doing the things that you say you're going to do, until you get better at doing those things and being honest with yourself about those things, you'll continue to struggle. That's just reality. And if you enjoy suffering, then by all means, keep doing what you're doing. And I don't say that to be sarcastic or to be insensitive. There was a time in my life where I liked suffering more than I liked the idea of changing my reality, because I was addicted to the story that my life wasn't working, that I wasn't good at business, that no woman was ever going to love me again after my fiance and I called off the wedding, that I was an embarrassment, that I was a shameful human being, that I had really screwed up, that I was a loser because I was living on my mom's couch. I was really in this story of suffering. And no matter what somebody said to me, no, you don't understand though. It's different for me. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to have your heart break like this. You don't understand. Blah, 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 blah. And my mom came in one day and she said something really powerful and really simple. She goes, Zach, I love you. Nobody cares. Like, we care that you're sad and we care that you're hurting, but like, I have to go to work today. Like, other people are going to work today. Like the world's not going to stop just because you're deciding to stop your world. So what else would you like to choose into? What else is possible for you? What else is possible for you? And when she started asking me that question, it started making me think, well, what would happen? And at this point, I'd done some personal development, quite a bit, actually. I'd read the books, quite a few, actually. I'd had coaches, I'd had mentors. And I said, okay, well, what might happen if I started applying and internalizing what I actually learned? And I was actually thinking about this the other day. And this is going to sound funny to some of you, but maybe not. I was thinking about that because that was only 12 years ago. 12 years, not a long time ago. So 12 years ago, 13 years ago now, excuse me, I'm dead broke. I'm living on my mom's couch and I'm trying to figure out how to kill myself. That's where I was in my life. Okay. Just to be very clear. And I thought to myself, okay, so how did over the last 13 years then I completely turn my life around? What was it? And this is going to sound ridiculous to you. You know what I did? I thought about every book I'd read. I thought about every mentor I'd had. I thought about every seminar I'd ever been to. I thought about every audio I'd ever listened to. I thought about every motivational quote I ever read. And you know what I decided to do? I decided to take them literally. Shocking. What an idea. I decided to take literally the words and the wisdom and the coaching of the people who'd gone before me. Because I simply took a look at my life and the story that I was telling myself about my life and the results that I was getting versus the stories that they were telling themselves about their lives and the results that they were getting. And wouldn't you know it, almost as if I was following a recipe to make a dessert. By putting the ingredients the exact way they had taught me to put the ingredients, guess what? I made a cake. Turned out pretty good. Turned out pretty good. So when you look at your life and you look at the ingredients that you're putting into what it is that you're baking, what are you putting in there? Are you putting in stories of affirmation? Are you putting in a belief of trust? Are you putting in a belief of surrender? Are you putting in a belief of being intelligent? Are you putting in a belief of having the ability to learn new skills? Or are you carrying the belief of, I'm not good enough, I'm not cut out for this, I'm not smart enough, I don't have as much experience as they do, I'm not young enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not this, I'm not that? What's the story that you're telling yourself about you? And here's the magic. The magic is in being honest about where we're at in our lives in this moment while living into the future reality of what we'd like to create. And what starts to happen is there becomes this tug of war between our old identity, what we've been conditioned to believe to be true about ourselves, and our new identity. There's this big tug of war. But the only way the new identity will be fully lived into is if we're willing to trust ourselves enough to make choices that are in alignment with the new identity, no matter how hard the old identity wants to fight to make old choices. Because eventually what starts to happen in this space between my two hands from old identity to new identity, what starts to happen is, going back to something I was sharing before, is the ego goes to work on understanding that it's safe for us to live into this new identity. But as long as you continue to tell the ego the story that it's not safe to move forward, you'll always stay here. You'll always stay here. So what I would invite you to do is really, again, take a look at how can I be better in certain areas of my life? What are the skills I get to learn? What are the ways of being I get to improve on? What are the stories I get to start reworking and reframing? And then put yourself in a position to win by setting up little micro intentions along the way so you can build trust with yourself. Because when you learn to trust yourself and your ego goes to work for you as opposed to against you, your soul has room to breathe. And then magic occurs. That's when magic occurs. When you can get your ego working alongside of your soul, which you have the ability to do, the whole world will open up to you. So with that being said, have a great evening, everybody. I'm going to post in both groups. What did you learn? I hope you found value in this call. Have a great night. We'll talk to you all soon. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Bob Marley, that didn't know what that was when it came on tonight, that's a story you're going to have to change. So go listen to more Bob Marley. All right. Lots of love, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.